bewitching hour. Um, let me call the meeting to order. I see we have all the commissioners online here, so we can get started. The first item is to approve the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
And I will second it.
Okay, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next item is to approve the minutes of April 28th, Planning and Zoning meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll give a motion, but I also have one change.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, and Commissioner Brault, you have a change to make to the minutes.
My comment is under section 4, which is public comment on any agenda item. I think it's number 2. We use the acronym IDA, and I just, for my reference, I'm not sure what IDA stands for. And then we use it later on in the minutes, and I just thought we should clarify what the acronym represents.
Sharon, you're on the line. Can you take care of that for us?
Intensely developed area, I believe.
Yeah. But I can
Okay.
spell it out.
Yeah, if we spell it out, I think that solves the problem. Is that right, Commissioner Brault?
Absolutely. I just wanted it to appear somewhere that, on its initial use. After that, it's IDA, just so that as a point of reference for people who might be reviewing it.
Okay. All right. With the minutes as amended, is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes for April 28th?
Aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are passed, approved. Now approving the minutes for May 11th, the Planning and Zoning work session. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I approve. Motion.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, and is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from May 11th, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the motions are approved, the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is public comment on this agenda. Do we have any member of the public that would like to comment on?
I would.
Okay, state your name and address and.
This is Wes Donovan of the Rod and Reel in Chesapeake Beach, 4165 Mears Avenue.
Thank you.
I just have something so minor, but to us, it's kind of not very minor. On page 3 of the document, the chairman's list of topics, in the chapter 7, it refers to the Rod and Reel Resort and Casino. And I just think that we aren't a casino, and I think it misrepresents our facility and our property down there. And I would just ask that the town remove the casino part of our name. I mean, we
So
don't
how do you want
consider it. If it could just say Rod and Reel Resort, I would appreciate that. I mean, people, when they go to read this and it reads casino, it just misrepresents who we are and what we actually do. And I just respectfully would ask that get removed. And that's my
Well, that
only
makes
comment.
sense to me.
Yeah, and that's my only comment.
Okay, we will make that correction.
Thank you.
Is any other public comment on the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Let's see. I'd like to start out, I guess, we received and distributed to the commissioners a page and a half or 2-page memorandum from the Economic Development Committee. I would like to propose, I'm open to suggestions on how we should move forward with that memo. My suggestion would be to ask one of the representatives from that Economic Development Committee to attend the next meeting in June, and then we can hear from them and discuss the items in more detail. Do we have any other suggestions on how to handle that EDC memo?
Well, this is Jan. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory myself. I think they put themselves out as, being in favor or not in favor of, what they did. I'm not sure what else we could glean from them personally. Just a thought.
Okay.
Um, This is,
How would you suggest we address the issues that they put in their memo? Just go down them one by one, or?
Well, let's see, they had 2, is that correct? 2 or 3?
I thought there was about 5. I don't have it sitting in front of me.
I
There
don't-
are 9, actually.
No. Okay, that's more than 3. All right.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, well, let's, just a heads up, we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting. And if one of the representatives wants to show up, that's fine, but we'll discuss each of those 9 items one by one, and any other issues that come up related to it. Does that sound fair?
yes, that sounds fair. I just wanted to add the comment, Chairman Brown, that I personally, I would like to hear from the EDC as well as know the composition of the committee, because I'm unfamiliar with who actually is on the committee, and how many members it comprises. So I'm interested to hear their perspective, and especially since they did have those 9 concerns or comments to make regarding the development of the town.
Okay, well, I will invite them, one or more of them to attend the next meeting, and hopefully we can.
Mr.
yeah.
Chairman, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman,
Yes,
I'm a little concerned that we're going to spend a long time on this. I'm really worried that this could turn into the entire meeting next time. I'm just not sure if it really needs discussion. These are, well, 2 town council members signed it, and it seems as though these issues should go before the town council. I mean, they're going to be discussing this anyway. So I'm not really sure. I understand. I mean, are they going to really change our mind? I'm not sure that. I mean, are we willing to spend an entire meeting, because it could be one of our last meetings, to try and complete this? Are we willing to spend 2 hours, because it could be 2 hours going over all these things and discussing and, whatever. So, I mean, I appreciate them sending this to us, but I'm just concerned it really should go to the town council, because a lot of it is political. A lot of it is, well, they can discuss this while they're discussing what we have to send to them, and they can modify it at the town council level if they choose to. So I'm not sure that we really have time to discuss all of this next meeting, because we're at the end of our ropes. We're at the very end of our of our sessions here. We've got really 1 month and that's it. So I would advise that we not really put this on the agenda, but we file it, maybe not in with our planning. I think personally, they should be addressing the town council with these issues. Let them resolve it on the town council level.
Okay, so is this a motion not to?
I would move to not have them come to the next agenda, to the next meeting, but rather they address this at the town council level. That would be my motion.
Yeah, I don't think we can tell them how they're going to address it, but we can say what we would do. So your motion is that we not take this up.
Right, not at one of our, yes, right. I think we need to complete our portion of this and then let them deal with this at the town council level.
Okay, do we have a second to not take up the subjects addressed in the EDC's memo?
Yes, I second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
The one thing I was thinking is that it is input from people in the beach. And I don't know if we have a, like a file on people that have sent us things expressing what they think about the plans for the town or what they want for the town. So, I mean, we could certainly file it in, public, a public opinion regarding the comprehensive plan and not just necessarily get rid of it, or send it back to town council. We could do both.
Okay, so is there any further discussion? The motion is not to take up the memo from the EDC. So all in favor of not taking up this memo and discussing it during one of our meetings?
Aye.
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 So I hear Commissioner Greengold, Commissioner Rutke, or I, Commissioner Larson, were you and I?
Aye.
And anyone else?
I'm
We have
opposed.
Did
I
Lori
can
vote?
see- Well, I can see what Cindy and Jan are saying, that we should not devote an entire meeting to this, but I guess they could still come and as part of public comment. I don't know.
Well, I agree with Lori. I mean, if the concern is, the overarching concern is that they're going to talk for 2 minutes, then for 2 hours, then limit their time. But certainly they have an opinion on the economic development from EDC on short-term rentals. And I think they have some concerns about issues that are very relevant to planning and zoning. So what would be the difference from hearing from them? Then we allow people to call in, and certainly those with real estate interest and residents who have a vested interest in the short-term rentals. We entertained everybody who had a comment on that. So I don't understand why we couldn't have a limited presentation or just open it up for them to make a 15-minute report.
Well, for one thing, the short-term rental I thought was off the table for our concerns right now. It's
Right.
really a political thing going on to the town council. I know they've got an issue about the height limits, but I figured that would be a town council discussion. Who signed this were 2 of the town council members.
Okay, well, we have 3 votes in not to hear from them. We have Commissioner Blackwelder and Commissioner Baralt, and I would say Commissioner Brown voting to hear from them. Being a tie, I will say we invite them for a half hour to present what they have. But I think it'd be bad form to ignore two town council members. So the motion does not pass, and I'll put it on the agenda for briefly for next meeting.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Chairman Brown, excuse me. A half an hour is, what is that? It's a fourth of our next meeting. I just see, I'm like Cindy, I see the passage of time and I'm getting really concerned. I think we should acknowledge their letter and say, we read it and we appreciate the feedback. I don't know that it needs more than that, but half an hour in our meeting is a ton of time. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that.
All right.
But the
sorry
problem is
for-
we're gonna want discussion though, Jan. I mean, if they get into these issues, I'm gonna wanna have some feedback and discussion as well. So it's gonna be more than 10 minutes, I'm afraid. If we have dialogue, and I appreciate the fact there are two town council members, but then is it fair to not have the other town council members come and give us their feedback? They could call themselves a committee and come and give us feedback as well. Well, we've got the blah, blah, blah committee. Let's come and talk and
Well,
give
they
our
can
2
do-
cents
They
then.
can do that anytime, and they're always invited to participate, and they have. Commissioner Morris has on a number of occasions.
Right.
Uh, I'm reluctant to say to not invite them after asking them to put together something for economic development and then not to hear from them. So we can ask them for a 15-minute presentation if that would make it more palatable. I would point out at our last meeting, we had the schedule presented of when this plan would be essentially finalized for public review, and the suggestion was to push that off until September because of just holidays, summer, etc. Not our to give the 60-day start something like July. So we've got a little more time than just this meeting. And frankly, we don't have the whole plan yet anyway. So until we get it, we can't finish it up. All right, moving along. We're going to go through the list that I put together, which hopefully represents your interests and concerns. I'd like to begin by asking Chris where we are with the other chapters and other things going into the plan. Give us a status report, and then go down the list as we publish it. Unfortunately, I didn't number them, so we'll be a little awkward, but it goes page by page in your copy, the paper copy that Sharon gave to everybody. I don't think there's been an update to that paper copy. I haven't received one. So it'll be page by page in that version. Chris, are you available to give us an update?
Yes, hi, Larry. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Chris.
Good evening, Chris.
Good evening. So the last chapter of the plan is the implementation section, and I'm intentionally holding off on that because that's really comes from your final decisions on the plan, and that is a fairly straightforward chapter. But in that chapter, I'd like to begin talking about the land use or the zoning types of changes and the various studies and all the things that are referenced in the document. So it's sort of a summary of the steps that are necessary to achieve the plan. So I haven't even drafted that chapter yet. The land use chapter is in major revision right now. I'm working with a GIS person that I work with to update the map to reflect, as you noticed, the map itself was kind of a rough copy because we changed it so many times, but we're going to update it in a kind of more formal way, just like the other maps in the report. So I anticipate having that ready for our next work session. And I candidly can't remember if we've scheduled that or not, but within 2 weeks, I'd like to have that to you. There's a couple of other items that are still outstanding, and that's the growth area, planning area discussion that is in the municipal growth chapter. And then a couple pieces of the municipal growth chapter that derive from the land use section. So all of that is coming together at one time. So let's just look forward to the next meeting that we have. And if we get through tonight's discussion on all these other chapters, then I think all we'll have is that land use and municipal growth discussion. And then it'll seamlessly blend right into the implementation section.
Okay, I had the date of the next meeting, July 10th or 15th. Does anyone recall?
I can look at my calendar.
June 15th, I think.
Wait
Yeah.
a minute.
Yeah, June 15th.
Yes,
Yep.
that's it, June 15th. Thank you.
Yep.
Got it.
And- Okay, so let's see. I'd like to run through these items, and we can do them quickly if depending on how much discussion there is, but I'll read the item, and some of them may have already been addressed, or Chris may have already corrected or taken them for action. If he has, we can move on. If there's discussion, then we'll go through the process of considering each one. If there's no motion to discuss and second to discuss, then we'll move on. So beginning with the first item, and it's all reference to the paper copy that you all have. On the vision statement on page 8, the first sentence doesn't match what we approved last August, and it's repeated there in the paper, which says, in embracing limited residential growth and focusing on steadily developing recreational and commercial amenities, we have guided residential and commercial development into ways that enrich the lives and experiences of the town residents and visitors. Is there any interest in discussing this further?
That's an oversight on my part. I actually amended it in a different version of this document, so I'll capture that in the final version.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, hearing nothing. The second thing on my list was organization of the plan. On page 10, it's lists functional areas listed in the first sentence don't match the table of contents. For example, the second sentence states that each chapter contains a statement of goals and recommendations, and not all chapters have that. So I just thought we need to make the table of contents match what's in the narrative in the document. Chris, any problems with that?
None at all. Agreed.
Okay. Any other discussion? None. Okay. Chapter 2. Do we expect any census data before, well, in the next week?
No, I would expect it before the summer's over. There's a lot of hemming and hawing about that. We just don't know. Everything's been pushed back because of COVID, and candidly, it's something that we could update well after the plan is adopted, simply by changing the data, updating it, adding a supplement. Those are the typical methods towns do.
Okay, so it's data that isn't going to affect, unlikely to affect anything in that we.
Unlikely, because we're using data that is as recent as 2018, 2019. the census is 2020. And while I expect it's going to be more reliable, in other words, have a smaller standard error, I don't think it's going to change any of your major policies in this plan.
Okay, is there any other discussion on chapter 2? Okay, chapter 3, I think we discussed this at the last meeting, but the first chart on page 18 really represents the status quo or in the past, and it's I think a couple people mentioned it wasn't clear to them from the way it was put together that was looking backwards or looking forwards, and we need to make it clear that that's looking backwards at what exists.
And I have notes from our last meeting on that. So that'll be reflected in the latest version, the final version.
Okay, any other questions, discussion? All right, and then on page 21, we're waiting for a forecast and impacts on page 21, which I will come out with the next revision. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, and I think essentially that's going to be reflecting the development that's in the pipeline now that's already been approved, because there's really not much more development that this plan complements or contemplates. So you'll see that described in the chapter.
Larry, I'm sorry you can't see me, but I'm on the draft here. Chris, going back to that zone development capacity chart, did you say that was going to, I'm sorry, that's not the right one. It's the one on page 18 or 17 rather, a municipal growth under zoning districts that permit new housing. Did you say you're modifying that right now? You're changing that, or what's going on there?
We're changing it. We're adding a kind of qualifying statement to indicate that this is a table that's useful in understanding what exists today. But the land use chapter, chapter 5, is making recommendations that will alter this table. We want people to read the plan and not think that this is a recommendation, but this is more of a description of existing conditions.
Right.
That's all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, moving along to chapter 4. The shoreline on page 27. It mentions 2 small beaches, one at Seagate. There isn't a beach at Seagate, is there?
Not to my knowledge.
No. As I understand it, there are three beaches, essentially Windward Key, the Roddenweir Resort, and Chesapeake Station, I think, has a private beach. And of course, there's Bayfront Park. But,
Right, that's correct.
so anyway.
I got that. Thank you.
All right, and on page 29, a comment was made on how to address decisions regarding, this is something that was added here in the last couple of days. I was asked, maybe Commissioner Brault can further explain, but the comment was made how to address decisions regarding grading and SWM plans to have coordination with local planning and engineering. Commissioner Brault, did you want to say any more about that?
I just wanted to, I mean, to me, it's very general, and I didn't know local planning, who actually that, you know, who we were considering in local planning. Was it, you know, other like Calvert County? Was it the state and the engineering? I didn't know if it was just the town engineer or we're going to partner with some, you know, state agency, but it just seemed very broad to me, especially, you know, how important it is for the grading and the, you know, erosion control.
So that was on page 29. Chris?
Yeah. So I I really think you're right on, spot on that point. The town, like most towns in Maryland, have delegated responsibility for stormwater management and sediment erosion control to their counties, because that's an expensive set of expertise to have in a small town. And the counties generally are kind of the implementing agencies for state law governing development. It's just in many ways, except for the actual zoning. However, what this basically does is question whether that is in the town's best interest moving forward. Not that the county does it, but that we're not more engaged in it. And the town has a town engineer now who's actually quite interested in reviewing stormwater management plans as part of the development process. And he's engaged quite a bit with the school board, for instance, on that project, far more than you'd expect from a municipal town engineer whose responsibility doesn't ultimately lie there, because that permit responsibility lies with the county. But we're engaging that issue now because we think it's so important, especially because this plan is talking about preserving land, minimizing sediment control, sediment loss, and reducing steep slope disturbance. So we want to make that, it would be fantastic if the town engineer came to you and presented the development plans grading scenario and stormwater management in a very technical way, just like I present the land use and zoning parts of it. So that's what this gets at.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Chris,
Yes.
would we still need to follow the county and state stormwater management regulations?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and the town there are regulations too, and we have adopted them.
Right.
They're administered by other agencies.
I thought that we had an independent agency inspecting that. Did we get an independent agency inspecting that?
No. No. I think I know what you're referring to. We have the right now to require third-party reviews of various grading scenarios. We see a grading plan, or we see an end result of when a project does its initial mass grading and the houses are being built. If the public works director and the town engineer have any particular concern, they can require third-party review, which would be funded by the developer. And we would bring in an expert geotechnical engineer to study it, to make sure that the compaction was right and the slope was as planned. So that's what might be what you mean, Lori.
Right. And we'd still be doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I don't want to spend too much time on this because probably the town council wants to take this up too. So.
Got it.
Okay, moving on, page 34, under vulnerability in the third line, it says maps are in the appendix. Are we planning an appendix with a variety of maps? What is your plan, Chris?
Yeah, we did those maps. And as I think about it, reflect on it, some of the newer planning commission members may not have seen that. We did the maps for the year 2050 and for the year 2100 as a sort of long-term potential impact. And I just felt for the ease of the reader and the sort of economy of space in the report that the 2100 maps didn't need to be placed in the document themselves, but would be in an appendix. And as I was rushing to get this done, it didn't occur to me that I didn't send that along with you, with the report itself. So, but I imagine they would be in the appendix with the description of what they are and why they're relevant.
Okay.
Larry, this is Cindy. Can I go back to page 30 quickly?
Yes.
Page 30. Chris, under the sea level rise projection on page 30, you, in the center of the paragraph, it says central estimate having a 50% probability. You have probably. So
Oh,
if you could
thank
just
you.
change that, that'd be great.
Yeah, got it. I've got quite a few of those in this.
Yeah,
draft.
there
then-
are quite a few of those, actually.
And thank you, Kathleen and Larry, for those. Yeah, we'll catch those.
Yeah, I know you will.
I've got it actually already, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's see, on page 37, let me shift to page 37 here. It says how to plan for the increased incidence of flooding for future decades. What is the best protection? Commissioner Brault, did you want to elaborate on that?
I guess, again, I just was looking for greater clarification to make sure what exactly we were referring to about that when, you know, what is the best protection and, you know, are the options, those options, we're going to identify them and then we would vote what we think would be the most beneficial to safeguard those areas. Or so I was just looking for further information about that. You know, again, would we partner with somebody, would you know, consult with, as far as, you know, when the hillside had the on B Street, when there was the slide, the mudslide, basically it ultimately resulted in an engineering firm independent being hired to do a study of the hillside and the vulnerability, and to find out what best way to address that. So I guess I was just looking at this in the same regard.
Well, a lot of those answers will come about once a master plan is prepared with community input, really with the interested parties that would be impacted by any flood barriers or flood zone management or resilience strategies, you know. So we can't say precisely, I can't give you a specific answer, but the plan is signaling that there's a need to finally to address this in a systematic way, and it recommends that we do that flood resiliency plan. And we've established the vulnerability areas and we've provided the mapping. We've done everything we can at a comprehensive plan level to set the table for the next level of more detailed planning.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I think that's really, you know, important, because I think there's so much information that is not known. I was in discussion with the town administrator on another matter today, and you know, one of the items that I found out is that where the ordinance has now been put on the down at Brownies Beach, that past south of the sign is not owned by the town. It's actually owned by a developer, and I never knew that. And I'm sure that my neighbors and area residents up on B Street have no idea about that. So I think it's really important when you talk about this would be included in the master plan and involving the, you know, the town as to how best to address that. I think it's critical because I think so much this type of information is just not known by the average resident here in the town. So
Kathleen, could you explain what it is that's owned by a developer? I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
well, I can't identify specifically, but in conversation today, my neighbors are up in arms about there's been a posting of an ordinance sign, and what's happened is now the deputies, code enforcement officers are down on Brownies Beach. If you're past the sign, you're getting the deputies are approaching you and telling you you're in violation, you're trespassing, and violating the town's trespass code. So there's also the warning, you'll be given a $125 citation. So obviously this is very concerning to people who have bought a home here in Chesapeake Beach to go to Brownies Beach. But what's happened is, in discussion with the town administrator, I found out that beyond the sign, south of that sign, is not the town. That there's a sliver of it that is owned by the town, but the rest of it in front of the wall, you know, the cliffs is owned by a developer. And that's the first time in 21 years I've ever heard that. And so I was like, a developer? So if it is in fact owned by a developer, then why is the town putting on a restriction about it when they don't even own the property is my question. And the other, if it is owned by, you know, a developer, it's like, I mean, I just had never heard that. So it makes me think in regards to the master plan, a lot of information is not known. So I think it's certainly important information, especially in regards to the, you know, the beach down here, Brownies Beach. So I'm learning a lot. You know, in fact, if you go on the allowable area right now that's not covered by the sign, what I'm told is that, let's say you go where you're allowed to as a town resident, but then you get in the water and then you pass down south of that sign, you're now in violation, and you could be cited for trespassing because you can't use the town's property to go in a restricted area.
Kathleen,
Yes?
did you guys discuss right of tides in that area at all?
Well, that's what one of my neighbors brought up, that maritime law says that in the water, you know, that the town has certain jurisdiction, but it doesn't exceed into the water. But I'm told that's not true at all. That my information is that even in the water, the town is, what they're saying is, you cannot access the water to be in a restricted area, that they have a right over that. And that wasn't my understanding.
I never heard that, Kathleen, in
That
30
sounds-
years.
So let's say if you go out in your kayak in the allowable area, which I do, but then I come back and I'm now south of the sign and I come upon the shore, I'm in violation. And what I've done is I've affected the trespass law in Chesapeake Beach because I've used an allowable area to get to a non-allowable area. So yeah, this is all news to me. So
I think there's some explanations that are needed and kind of beyond our comprehensive
Certainly.
plan discussion. So
absolutely.
we can maybe have an offline discussion about this topic. I know we've discussed that area quite a bit a year and a half, 2 years ago. So if I can, I'd like to move on. The next.
My apologies, I digress.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Oh, that's it.
Well,
Okay.
we do talk about the beaches, Brownies Beach,
Yeah, go ahead.
throughout the document. Do we not? We reference it in many different places. If we don't have control over it, then it would make a difference as to what we would put in this plan, I would think.
I think it's a question of just understanding the geography and of what's there, and I don't think anybody here is prepared to address that right now.
Isn't Holly on our call? I thought she told Kathleen.
Yeah,
No?
she may be. Yep. She just unmuted.
I'm here.
Sorry.
Did you hear any of the discussion we were just having about Brownies Beach?
I heard portions of it. Is there a specific question for me?
Well, apparently there are some signs about trespassing on or near the beach border or perimeter, and Commissioner Baralt was concerned that it was confusing.
Oh, Well, I was just sharing, Holly, with the commission that about the ordinance that's been posted down at Brownies Beach and what we had discussed about south of the sign that the town owns, not all of it, but that it's owned by a developer, which I never knew in my 21 years. So my point was to reference that in saying, when we're talking about a master plan that would address the flood resiliency, and Chris had made the comment that we would have to get the town's way in, and my point was that's absolutely important because I feel like as a resident of B Street, I had no idea that the town didn't own that property solely past the south of the sign, and I never knew that. And that tied with the, as you had shared with me, going to an allowable area to get to a restricted area is a violation of the town's trespassing. So I was just sharing that information.
Chairman, do you have a specific question you want me to answer on this?
Well, I think we need to get a map out and see exactly the perimeters and boundaries that we're talking about, because it's a little hard to talk about it in the abstract.
Right. And then the actual rules about the rights of tides. Because I think Kathleen has a really good point. Why are we spending tax resources to protect an area that somebody else owns and keep people off the beach?
So there is an area that the town owns that is deemed as dangerous. There is a very large portion south of the beach that is not owned by the town. It's privately owned. So the signs are just a reaction to public safety related to the cliffs that are continually degrading and falling down on the beach below.
So I think we had this discussion last year when signs were put up. And like Kathleen said, people have been walking that beach for years. Ever since I was a child, I've been walking that beach. And is there anything else that can be done aside from telling people they can't walk that beach?
Well, what you're talking about is a safety problem, right? Of the cliff falling down and hazarding the public, I think.
That's correct.
And so the water comes almost up to the cliffs, as I recall. So it's a safe, other than reinforcing the cliffs, which would be a major engineering undertaking. It seems to me a warning is most appropriate to protect the public.
Right, a warning of the danger, but not a warning or a trespassing sign, I would assume, because sometimes there is a beach.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it's a lot more convoluted, but the residents along B Street have a great objection, obviously, to this, because now they're going to be cited, and it clearly says $125 fine. And I certainly understand, and I think every resident along B Street understands the import of those cliffs and their archaeological site, and to stay away from them. But I think there's a beach in front that people have always used. But certainly the town has taken the tone of, we're going to cite you. And this is not why people didn't buy here in Chesapeake Beach, a coastal community, since 1654 to be, have this kind of tone. And I think it really has inflamed my neighbors. And so I know this is not necessarily, it's going to be part of the comprehensive plan, but I just think people were not aware of it. And now, there's big signage down on the beach, stop, and it's really taken a different tone now. And I guess we're talking about tourism and welcoming everybody. And right now, it's not, Brownies Beach is still not open to residents. It's only open to residents. It's not open to the public, and there's no even, it's not currently on the table when that will be opened. And it just is, I don't know, it seems like there's been a whole paradigm shift down on Brownies Beach.
Well, also that, if I, Chairman Brown, may I comment also?
Yes, go ahead.
Brownies Beach is the only beach we have that can be accessed by anybody who wants to go down there. So it becomes a very big deal to me. You know, the other beaches were taken over, given away, whatever you want to say, in front of Windward Key and etc. So where do we go when we want to go to the bay? If we want to put in a kayak or something like that, you could say Fishing Creek, but you know, we've always thought that Brownies Beach was ours. So maybe we do need a map and a different way to look at it.
Okay, well, let me talk with Holly, and we'll see if we can come up with a presentation to explain the situation as it exists today, and then we can discuss what, if any, recommendations the commission might consider. Does that sound
Great.
reasonable?
It does to me. Thank you for the idea.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Let's see. Going to page 38, old growth forests. Do we need to add some language describing our zoning ordinance 290-390, Article 10, forest conservation? Put something in about that and our established plans for the old growth forests. Chris?
Yeah, I think so. Why not? We have it, and it is the key to preserving these forests. It's probably the best we have, except for outright town ownership. So thumbs up to that. I think that's an important thing to add. And it adds context too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on old growth forests, not florists, forests? I'm an old growth florist, I guess. Randall Cliffs, page 39. Are we prepared to discuss whether we want to recommend acquisition or any growth in that area? A changing of the town's borders? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Are we, Chairman, are we talking about Randall Cliffs or that parcel that we were just talking about?
Basically,
Because I would be in,
that's, yes, Randall Cliffs, that parcel, that area, south along the waterfront. And we've talked about that parcel where the Beatles live for a long time.
I'm prepared about that.
But I know it's gone back and forth. We might. I mean, do we want to recommend or just leave it alone? That's my question to the commission.
I would like to motion to recommend acquisitioning that parcel.
And that's pretty much in the walkable communities plan, isn't it?
It is not. It was discussed, but it was removed from that plan. And there were some plans that went along with it, but I think even if we do nothing to that parcel, that we need to acquisition it anyways. A, to prevent what's happening with these signs on the beach, and B, in the future, those cliffs are going to erode. It's going to be a beach. That parcel is very important to our town. It's our last beachfront parcel. I think we need to keep it. I think it's crazy to let that parcel go if we can acquisition it. And right now, nobody can build on it anyways. And I don't think anybody on this commission wants to remove the restrictions that exist on it So I think that's a win-win for whoever owns it and us.
Anyone else want to comment?
The only comment I have is I know that we talked about that years ago, that needs to be acquired. And, I always chuckle because everybody talks about all the tourism, but our beach is so tiny that there really isn't a lot of room for tourism. I don't even know where the tourists are going to go if we don't do some expansion in our park area and in our beach area. So I don't see any alternative but to acquire that area if we can with, I think there you go. So I would say, yes, I would go along with that, definitely. Oh, there you go. We got a map of it.
Yeah, it's this property here. This is municipal owned on the north side. And this is the parcel that you're referring to.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
Perfect.
entire,
And it's in the
That's
town
me.
now. Yes, it's in the town now.
but we don't own it.
Correct. It's privately owned.
Okay. Absolutely. I agree with Cindy and Lori. We're more and more finite area of beach in Chesapeake Beach. I mean, we might have to take out the beach part of it in our name.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I definitely think it would be in our best interest to acquire that property for sure.
Chairman, may I comment?
Yes, yes.
I
Commissioner-
agree with Cindy and Lori. I think that protects our town's interest. We've talked about finding parks and having other places for our residents to go. And by that, I mean trails, nature, explanations, that kind of thing. There aren't a ton of parks in town, and I think it would be terrific to own. I think it would protect us and give us more opportunity if we see ourselves as a not resort town, but one walkability and having places to walk to.
Thank you. Thank you. As I recall, the discussion a couple years ago, the so-called developer can't do anything because of the beetles and the other protected species that are there and other restrictions. So there was some talk about the owner being very interested in unloading that for a reasonable price. Now, whatever that means, that's another subject. But unless I hear an objection, I'd say we include it as a recommendation in the comprehensive plan.
Yes, I agree, sir.
Okay. Let's see. On page 40, in the recommendation, it talks about inundated or submerged. The suggestion has been made that we change it to read, prevent further residential development or intensification of residential land use. The intent is to prevent the high-risk residential development, but to allow lower risk commercial retail development that have site plans which can address stormwater management and elevation of buildings within the lot boundaries. And I think this is one, Commissioner Blackwell, you were,
Correct.
so I don't know if you want any further discussion on it or thoughts.
I'll answer any questions anybody has.
Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to, that sentence, prevent, or where you paraphrase it, prevent further development or intensification of land use. I think it's complex. I mean, I don't know whether you could just simplify it to say prevent further development of the land, but the whole the piece to me of prevent further development or intensification of land use, it just seems very complex. So maybe,
So
So
Go
you have
ahead.
a
I'm
suggestion.
sorry. Well, my suggestion is prevent further development of land use, but, or, I was trying to think of another word for intensification, because I'm not sure, if somebody just reading that would understand what intensification is referring to. Maybe further residential development or expansion, but it's not really expansion, but the intensification, I just think it's pretty complex. So,
Thoughts, Commissioner Blackwelder?
my addition to that sentence was just the two residential words to qualify residential, but still allow other intensification of the properties. So I guess it would be up to Chris to understand if developers would understand that word intensification. But my purpose in qualifying it as residential is because residential people in a flood zone just present more problems than a commercial building would. If there's a storm warning, a commercial business can shutter their doors and prevent people from coming and having to be evacuated. But people who live there would not be able to do that. They live there. So those people would need to be evacuated. All the displacement issues with residents in the flood zone. In addition, residents in the flood zone, residential development is typically, more intense, whereas you could have a piece of property in the flood zone, you could possibly, depending on lot size, develop the lot in a way to where one small building, say it's a little cafe, say it's, I don't know, a shirt shop, a taco shop, whatever. You can build that up and still have parking all around. But if you're trying to build residence in the flood zone, you have a much more substantial footprint that you need to have. So that's why I wanted to qualify and say, we're not going to intensify residential use, but we're not going to eliminate all uses, because there are ways to deal with the flood zone, and you can deal with them if you're not being so intense with your development.
Okay, Chris, well, first let me say, if you aren't speaking, if you could go on mute, because that's, we're getting some background noise from some place. And second, Chris, can you clean that up, address the concerns there?
I can, and can I just offer an explanation too?
Yes.
These are areas that are expected to be literally underwater by 2050 as we prepare these plans. Once we get into doing a more detailed mapping with the master plan, we'll have a better grasp of that. But so when I say no more development in those areas, that would be no more conversion of vacant land to any use.
Yeah, I agree. with
And
that.
when I say no more intensification, that would mean that activities that exist there now can stay, provided they can adjust, of course, to the water issue. And they can also change to other uses that are not as intense. So for instance, you can imagine a marina or a boat maintenance facility continuing to operate as sea level rise happens, because they're a water-based, water-dependent operation. They could adjust, but they can't then decide to build a hotel or a restaurant in an area that's going to be underwater, because it takes a lot of infrastructure for a municipality to support that level of development in areas that are underwater. And so that's what I mean by prevent and limit intensification. So it's really irrespective of whether it's residential development. Certainly, I would say residential adds an added layer of concern, the public safety issues that Lori was talking about. But any type of development that needs to be served by the municipality above and beyond what exists today raises real concerns. So I kind of like the way it's written, although I can add the context to it and tweak it a bit to add the residential nature of it and that Lori's mentioning. It's like right now it's very streamlined language. I can offer a little more context to it if the commission would like me to.
Well,
Yeah.
I think, Chris, we need to go along with your train of thought that we should lower the intensity of the type of building and construction, or the type of use. It's the type of use. You want to lower the type of use or limit the type of use. So even though, we're talking maybe commercial, even commercial, you're adding a layer of liability to the town if we approve such types of structures. So I think, Chris, your point is well taken. We really just want to limit the type of use of that area.
In essence, in terms of legal speak and zoning, certain uses become non-conforming, meaning they were permitted before and they're grandfathered. They can't become any more intense, but you can switch one out for another if the intensity is the same. The goal, though, is gradually to eliminate those uses from the danger zone, the area that is actually going to be underwater. And irrespective of whether it's going to be underwater in 2030 or 2050, we know flooding impacts will be far more severe there than they are today and anywhere else in the town. So we don't want any more storage of fuel, for instance, unless it's elevated. There's this whole level of regulatory control that has to happen if uses remain in that high risk area.
So Chris, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Blackwelder, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. What areas are we talking about right now? Are we talking about any of those parcels that just received site plans, or are we just, I have a hard time seeing which places on the map we're talking about.
Well, here in, okay, let me just share my screen.
Sorry, I know we've seen these maps 100 times.
Lori, I needed to, so.
Okay.
Can everyone see this?
I asked for a map.
Okay, so what this particular statement is referring to is the open water with 2.1 foot sea level rise. So it's the area that's the darkest blue on this map. And of course, most of that area is open water now, but some of it is land. And the area along Harbor Road Extended is an obvious example, okay? This area. You can see how close it is to Fishing Creek and the wetlands. And we know by being on the site that sea level rise is happening. I mean, if you want to see an example, go there. So that's an example where this plan, if adopted by proper zoning, would not allow for the conversion of a boatyard into a hotel, for instance, okay? Or a multifamily development project, as an example. And the same thing applies somewhat over here. And in answer to the question, part of this property is contained within that one of those projects that were submitted, the site plans, but not all of it. Part of this area that's projected for open water is contained in that project, and it's Harbor Vista West. But that's not to say that it's a sure thing that you can develop here any longer, because in the land use section, we talk about changing the zoning category for those areas to resource conservation to allow them to be used in a manner that's consistent with the environmental issues happening. you know, so yeah. And then there are other areas further north that would be quite open water, but most of those already are contained within wetlands, at least in the next, 25 years or so. So there's really not much of it, a spillover of water on a continual basis. There's lands that will be, these lighter blue will be flooded, have a 10% chance of flooding every year, which is high risk, let me tell you. And that's why the land use section talks about treating these areas differently than anything else in town. So anyway, yep.
Oh, so so you say there's only one parcel that would be affected by this, the no development that you're suggesting. And what is the liability with making that resource conservation as far as?
Oh, one of the parcels that was, actually it's not just one, but there's no liability per se. I suppose there's always a liability, but there is a fundamental rational basis for a land use decision here. And if the town council follows through with adopting zoning changes that limit the development potential on land that is at high risk of being flooded, or on land that the town doesn't want to extend its water and sewer facilities, then it's within its right to do that. That's why we do planning, after all. And when we have such foundational sort of public safety type of issues at stake, that's why we have you on board as the planning commission to make recommendations like this. That's not to say that you want to extinguish every possible use of land on that property. That would be unreasonable too. But it has to be thoughtful and thought about in the context of the zoning and how it could be mitigated. What development would be realistic there? Maybe you don't want to see a multifamily development project in a project like that, or in a parcel like that. I know you don't, but a short-term marina project that is consistent with the uses around it, or a research facility that's studying sea level rise. I'm just throwing out things, or aquaculture activity, or a recreational pursuit, whether it's public or private. There's a lot of other uses that would fit compatibly with an area that is increasingly becoming flooded over time.
Okay, so there's no concern that we would get sued over that.
But I wouldn't say there's no concern. I suspect there is concern. There would be concern.
Right.
But if you wanted to mitigate that concern, you would look at the underlying zoning district and what uses are permitted there and what densities are allowed there. And you would create some type of allowance to transfer that density out somewhere else, to give relief to somebody who would be impacted by this change in land use policy. That would be like the most generous way of dealing with this land use change, right? Because you would try to make someone whole over time. But we've introduced those ideas previously to the commission, and they've never really stuck with the commission, and so that they don't show up in the current plan.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so as I understand it, Chris, you will look at tweaking some of the language there to better describe this discussion.
Yes, happy to do that.
Okay.
Oh, and Chris, on page 40, if you go back up to the port wardens, there's a word response. You have responsible, and it should be responsibility. If you look at the port, go up there, there's a word misspelled, I guess.
What paragraph is that?
It's right above the one we were just on about the port wardens. And it talks about the responsibility and it's, they're responsible, but it's supposed to be responsibility. Do you see that, Chris? Or do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I actually do know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on. In chapter 5, there's a recommendation or a suggestion that we recommend the town adopt a developer's rights and responsibilities and a two-part, well, let's deal with that. Commissioner Blackwelder, you had suggested we add that and adopt a developer's rights and responsibilities, or recommend development of a developer's rights and responsibilities ordinance. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So I saw this in the North Beach Town Code and on their webpage, and it's an ordinance that basically allows you to negotiate things that you need above and beyond what's permitted. So, we are doing a very, we're down zoning. We're doing that to protect our town from a lot of, over intense development because our code has been so wide open in the past. And now that we've intensified in certain areas, we can't really afford to have our entire code wide open, but there might be things at times, there might be times in our history when we need certain things, and this ordinance allows the town to negotiate with a builder, and maybe somebody wants to build somewhere where there's more sensitive things that need to be addressed. Well, that can all be put in their plan and in this negotiation. Or maybe we need more senior housing or more affordable housing. Well, you can make that part of your agreement to let a builder do a certain thing. It's a way to get what you want or what you need as a town without just outright permitting everything under the sun and hope you get it. It's almost like a bonus overlay that you don't have to give because it is a negotiation. I would just encourage everybody to read that ordinance and see how it's written and what it does. And if Chris knows anything about those types of ordinance, I would be interested to hear your professional opinion about that.
I like them in the right situation, but they can't trump the foundation, the basic zoning that's in place, or the comprehensive plan. There still has to be consistency between the two. But within the allowable uses in the zoning, you can tweak things, you can require a little more, but it's also, you're giving up something too. I mean, it's a negotiation. But that does create a reciprocal relationship where you have a public-private partnership essentially being formed to develop something. Ultimately, the municipality has the authority under its zoning codes to do it and to decide whether it wants to or not. It also transitions your plan review authority to some degree to the elected officials, right? Because they ultimately are the ones who sign the deal. And so you're giving up a little to do this. I mean, you certainly can recommend the development rights and responsibilities, but you should think through that, because then it becomes political. A decision is ultimately political. The zoning planning approach in Maryland and nationwide is to sort of, theoretically at least, eliminate politics from the planning and zoning decisions. An agreement like this, because it's negotiated between the mayor and council and an elected and a private property owner, is of necessity, it's by its nature political. I mean, whether good or bad, it's It's the politicians making its judgment. And certainly they know what's needed because they are the representatives of the community, but it gives authority to decision-making authority that they don't have now in the planning and zoning world, for better or for worse. And it's up to, I think it's a great tool to have in the toolbox. And ultimately it'd be up to the town to decide whether they use it or not. But why not? And particularly since things are becoming so complicated, and sometimes it's going to be necessary to have flexibility to achieve some of these broad objectives that we want because of the sea level rise issue and because of the tight compaction that we have in different areas, because of the height issues and flood zone elevations required. Maybe some give and take is what is necessary to make good projects and reinvestment in the town happen. So I'm not adverse to that at all.
Could it be confined to certain zones, or how would that be implemented? Would it be like, would it apply to every project? Would it apply to certain projects of a certain size? How would you recommend we applied it?
It's been so long since I read the enabling legislation about that. I don't know, and I wasn't prepared to talk about that. So, but I can look into that, Lori. It seems like it could be customized to areas. I mean, it's a legislative act, but unless the enabling legislation prevents that.
Okay.
If
Does anybody have?
you look into it, I will.
I would just be concerned that it does become political, and if you get the wrong people on the town council who have vested interests in certain projects, then I think you can lose a lot. I mean, that's the downside I see in something like this. I would have to see a synopsis on what these rights and responsibilities would be and how we'd want to write that up. But
I suggest that the plan could say something now that says, consider we recommend that the town council consider and evaluate and a developer's responsibility agreement, or ask for our opinion about it so we can study it. So, that provides room for everybody to get their heads around the idea. So we don't need to take time now to study
Sure.
this and figure it out,
right.
but we can acknowledge that it's a valuable tool, and let's see if it's relevant to the future of town.
Great.
I like that.
Okay, is there any objection to taking that route that Chris described? Hearing none. Okay, we'll move on to the next item under Chapter 5 on the list. In the existing conditions narrative, identify all protective easements, restrictions, overlays, and zones that currently apply under the 2010 comprehensive plan. And that's recommendation number 1. And the second part of that is, as a land use objective, retain all protective easements, restrictions, overlays, and zones that limit development within resource conservation zones or the critical area. And again, if Commissioner Blackwelder wants to elaborate on that.
Thank you, Chairman. The intent of that was just to document what is successfully conserved and limited right now in our comprehensive plan, and then make it an objective to retain that so that we don't inadvertently open up areas that we don't need to open up, or to, if we're acquisitioning, pay for areas that weren't really worth money to begin with because they weren't developable to certain degrees.
I guess my first thought with recommendation number 1 is identifying all protective easements, restrictions, overlays, and zones. That could be a pretty long list. Is that Am I wrong, Chris?
Practically, I mean, if we had to identify all of them, it's almost impossible because whenever someone's developing in the critical area, we have some protected measures over, a small share of their property that they plant as mitigation. But I don't think Lori's talking about that kind of itsy bitsy stuff. If you're talking about forest conservation easements that are already in place, irrespective of the comprehensive plan, I mean, they're in place. I can do that. I can show that.
So identifying the major protective easements, restrictions, et cetera, would be.
Yeah, I think that's better. And the zone would be resource conservation. That is the current protective zone. We can include the critical area map, right? Which shows it has its own resource conservation area, which is very restrictive, but it coincides with our resource conservation. They lay on top of each other.
Right. Open spaces in communities. That would be one that's dedicated already that I would like identified.
Yeah, the major open space.
Say it. I'm sorry, Chris. Excuse me. Go ahead.
We're having a big storm right here now. I don't know if you can hear. It's a lot of static in the back. I have your volume turned up really high because I can't hear you over the storm, which is a good thing to say in case I cut out. That a tree fell on top of the house.
Right.
Darn trees.
There's no rain here, Chris.
Oh, really? Good.
Oh, it's here. Yes, indeed.
It's
We're
not,
gonna
I don't
do
hear any rain here, Jan. Is there rain here? No, it's not raining.
Earlier.
So I was saying that those major protective easements and major open spaces that are associated with the newer subdivisions, yeah, that's an easy thing to do. I could just have a series of property tax maps that show, boom, boom, or just place the plats on the plan, or within, maybe we don't want to bore every reader. We can say what we want to say and say the plats are available in the appendix. I kind of like that because I don't like to jumble up things too much. But yeah, there's plenty of ways of addressing this topic if you want it in the plan.
I think that would be helpful because, yes, I would love to have that in the plan, have that extra protection.
Yep,
Good
I would
suggestion.
too.
A description of what exists today. Fair enough.
Right.
Why not?
Right.
Okay, is there any other discussion or objections to that? Otherwise, we'll move ahead with Chris identifying those. Okay, hearing none. Let's see. In the recommendation sections of the land use chapter, the first one is do not permit residential land use in the a resource conservation zone is the recommendation. How would that work, Chris?
Oh, well, I think that's directly from last meeting's deliberation. You would simply eliminate housing as a permitted use in the resource conservation zone. Right now, single family detached housing is allowable, provided you have at least 1 acre per housing unit. And provided, of course, you can develop it. It's not too steep and you obviously can't build a house on a marsh. But for land where it is physically possible to build and it's zoned resource conservation, it is possible to build a house. For instance, the Panhandle, Randall's Cliff, we've talked about. And yes, there are a number of restrictions given the species that are there, and the restrictions from DNR, but there still could be houses built there. Some number of houses could be feasible because our zoning ordinance allows for it and the critical area zone allows for it. that allows for some marginal use. In this case, it would be a few houses, practically speaking. So I thought after the last meeting, the consensus was that a statement like this was going to go into the plan.
Okay. Have you read that paragraph under that statement there? Because it's generally, I think, what Commissioner Blackwelder had in mind. And is that consistent or?
Yeah, I thought it was one of the best paragraphs that are in that will make its way into this plan. I just thought it was so well written.
Okay.
I mean, it's spot on.
Okay.
It shows the rationale. It shows the theory and the basis for making this judgment. I think it's spot on.
All right.
Yes, indeed, Chris.
If there are no objections or other comments on that, we'll move on to chapter 6. Page 49. Remove or reduce regulatory issues that are eliminating senior housing options, and also explore other housing options than large assisted living facilities. Commissioner Baralt, you had added that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, in reading the report, it had talked about that as there are more restrictions, there are less options for senior housing, and that's really going to be impactful for people living and residing and moving and obtaining housing, especially for seniors in Chesapeake Beach. And so I just wanted to, I mean, I'm not in favor of that, obviously. I think it's important to have a gentrified population here in Chesapeake Beach, but I just felt like, perhaps, I know the preservation of the bay and making this a small charm community, but I hate the idea of that in our regulations, we're preventing seniors from having the opportunity to reside here. And so if there was additional options rather than having a large, assisted living residence, if there was, I don't know, not necessarily a group home, but just a smaller, some senior housing without necessarily having it on such a grand multi-faceted building, but just a smaller, residence that would allow senior housing to be more affordable and available. I would like to look into that.
So Chris, any directions on how to address that?
Can I direct your attention to page, well, let me just share my screen. I want to go to page 53 under create a town intergenerational housing task force. So let me share the screen here. Can everybody read this?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's go down to the third paragraph under this heading. Begins with
Right.
efforts to promote. And I'll just give you a minute to read that. So that addresses, I think, Kathleen's concern in a major way. And I think if I read her right, she's perhaps asking us to be a little more affirmative and to say what it is that we really want, which would be that we should proactively consider different housing types for seniors other than more institutionalized, larger settings. I guess.
That's correct, Chris. I mean, in that paragraph there, it says basically absent innovations in senior housing, middle and lower income seniors are going to find it difficult to afford. And just looking at some of the demographics that were presented in the beginning of that whole formula about who can afford to live here, it certainly seemed with our more restrictive code and regulations that we are making it more challenging and difficult fiscally for the senior population. So that last sentence, I think, sums up my, I totally concur with the point of that we have to have some flexibility. Otherwise, we're just gonna have, people in Chesapeake Beach who, dual incomes, who have salaries, way above the median to afford to live here.
So do you think I need to revise this paragraph at all, or does it
No,
address?
I think I concur with it, and I guess I just wanted to make sure that, we'd be mindful of that, because I think it's an important point.
I do too, Kathleen. I support you very much on that. Guess I'm not supposed to do that.
Can I have one thing I just want to add to that?
Go ahead,
You
Commissioner.
know, in other parts of the country, they do have these. In fact, my mom is in one right now. It's called a board and care, and they take a single family housing and basically they turn it into like a bread and breakfast, but with assistance to help out with these people, with whenever they need help. So, but I think, Chris, doesn't zoning allow, zoning already allows for bed and breakfast, but doesn't it also allow for childcare and home care already?
Well, let's look. I don't want to go from memory. Here's the list of permitted uses. Yeah, it does allow for those uses. The question is where. So home daycare is allowed as conditional use within most of the residential districts, residential village, medium density and low density. And I'll get to the conditions. So a daycare center, a little more formal kind of commercial operation. It's a special exception use within the commercials or residential districts. And also a conditional use in the residential village zone. Orphanages, nursing homes, and licensed establishments for the care of aged, disabled, or convalescent persons. You see, it's not allowed in the medium density or the high density. It's a special exception in the low density, which means that there's some obstacles to getting it done. It would have to go through a public hearing and meet certain standards. And it's a conditional use in a residential village. It's permitted in the commercial maritime zone, but candidly, as a practical matter, I just don't see that unless we add more commercial. I don't see that as a possibility.
Chris, you said it wasn't permitted. I'm sorry, Chris. Go back. You said it's not permitted in the medium or low density, correct?
Correct, right. A group home, which is kind of what you might be discussing. And often we think of group home as like a halfway house from someone transitioning from confinement, prison. Yeah, that's considered a group home, but also group homes are increasingly protected under the RLIPRA Acts, Religious and Institutionalized Persons Act. I mean, we have to allow people to live in a single family house from if they're convalescent or they're recovering from drug rehab or drug rehab services or something like that. That's, even though we call it a special exception, federal law requires us. And so when we update the code, we have to update this kind of thing too.
Exactly.
But addressing these types of things in a more probably humane way would actually reflect the needs of the community, probably now, but certainly in the future, as we have more seniors that we'd like to keep in that community, or more seniors want to stay living in Chesapeake Beach. Because a group home is essentially, could be an assisted living facility in a house, 2 or 3 residences. who are unrelated by marriage and family and who live together with the care of a manager or operator.
Mhm.
That's the type of thing I think Kathleen's getting at, and what you're talking about too. as this
Right.
board and bread thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very common on the West Coast. That's what a lot of these seniors are living in.
At different places in this housing chapter, I refer to various obstacles that exist that kind of make it difficult to deliver on this. This is the type of thing I'm referring to, and that someone thoughtfully has to go through this and think about the housing needs of the elderly and really come up with the right set of standards and regulations that allow it within certain realms of, certain parameters of acceptability. And that's going to be an important study that the Planning Commission, I think, and I hope will ultimately do. And that's what the plan suggests right now.
Right.
I've also, in a lot of my research, found that there is a problem that short-term rentals seem to be pushing out a lot of the seniors from their neighborhoods because they feel less secure when one moves in their neighborhood. So apparently that's another issue that is contributing to why people have to move, is that they don't feel secure with these short-term rentals are going, especially in beach communities or recreational areas, whatever. That seems to be a problem. But I think if we have some kind of a committee that can oversee this and be a little more specific on this, it's very possible to open these, especially in the area, as you say, with that residential village. There seems to be more single family, bigger areas, bigger spaces. A lot of these have to have more than 3 to 4 people in order for it to work financially, from what I understand. Because I've studied this in wanting to open one myself, actually. In fact, we were going to buy that property on Cox Road, Chris. Remember I talked to you about that years ago, a couple years ago? I was going to buy that for that particular purpose. But it was, but you have to have a certain layout. It's got to be all handicap designed. It's a very expensive process, actually. But it's really the best way to go as far as housing seniors, you might say, in a less expensive way than like going up to an assisted living in Annapolis, which is onerous to most seniors. These are usually a cheaper way to go. So, but I think having that committee, that senior aging committee, is an important one that we can address all these issues.
So we think we hit the
I agree.
right spot with that one. We hit the target on that, I guess. That's good.
I think we understand it a little better now, I think,
Right,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. I like your idea, Cindy, because
Yeah.
I think we have to accommodate, and
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Yeah, I'm
we
pretty
have to
familiar with that
accommodate-
because I've been looking into doing it myself and I've got a lot of familiarity with it. So I know how these things work, but it's an expensive project because of the handicap accessibility issues. So it's not an inexpensive, and so you need to have at least room enough for 4 to 5 or 6 clients, you might say, to put in there to make it worthwhile financially.
Right.
Anyway,
Cindy,
yeah.
can you give me the name of the title, what they're called in California?
In California, they're called board and cares.
Okay.
But a lot of them, if they're bigger, they're called assisted living. But assisted
Right.
living, board and care, and it's a very common, they bring in usually a lot of people from other countries to come help and assist. But my mom lives in a house, one of these long ranch style homes with 6 bedrooms. She has her own bedroom, and there's just 6 clients per house. And it really worked well in COVID because once they shut down in quarantine, it's a very safe environment. You only have 6 people there. You keep everybody else out, and the workers usually live there. So it was a very safe environment. My mom, who's 103, never got sick at all. It was great. She's
Now
still
that you
around.
mention That, now that you mentioned that, I think there's one on Route 2, is on your way.
There
to
is one on
Annapolis.
Route 2. There is one
Yeah,
up on
it's-
Route 2.
It's
Mhm.
called Country Home or something,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
yeah.
There's one in Owings. They're dotted around the area. You will see them if you look them up. There are not a lot of them.
Skinner's Turn Road, I believe there's one.
There is one on Skinner's Turn.
Yep.
Yes.
I really like that idea.
Yeah, but that's what, but you, again, you need, like where we live, guys, over in this area on the hill over here, there's not a lot of land. You need a bigger single family. You can't have a second story and make it really work. You can have people living in the second story, but you have to have at least 3 or 4 or 5 bedrooms. And we just, unless you put a couple lots together, it just, you know, there just isn't any property here. But over in the residential village area, there might be some areas, and I know Chris was addressing this, oh, we got to be able to put properties together. And, you know, I guess we could look at that as maybe a reason why you'd want to put a couple properties together, but it might be a little bit too expensive to do that because again, it's by the time you end up looking at all the costs, you can't afford to put properties together and make it work financially. I mean, I've really researched this one out, trust me. It's a very expensive proposition for an owner to do this.
Maybe that's why we have a developer's rights and responsibilities agreement. And the plan recommends more coordination with the housing authority. This is the type of, you know, public-private
Yes.
work that can solve real life problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
good point. That's a good point. That's a good point, Chris.
Okay, if there's no further discussion on this, on page 50, the third line from the bottom, the last word, it says the plan recommends minor zoning adjustments. Is that a fair assessment of what we're recommending, minor zoning adjustments?
With respect to this particular chapter, yes, in terms of housing affordability, there's certainly nothing revolutionary about these recommendations. It's really like, let's see if we can tweak the parking standard in those areas where duplex housing is allowed so that someone could actually do a duplex if it passes muster with the planning commission. Or let's allow for, let's look at the lot size requirements. Remember, you need 5,000 square feet for each dwelling unit, which means you need 10,000 square feet to do a duplex. And there are not many 10,000 square foot lots. So it might be reduced to 7,500, for instance, which would make more properties eligible for popping in a duplex or an accessory apartment or something like that, which actually is the same type of flexibility that would be needed to do this senior housing ideas that we've discussed. So yeah, I think they're minor. They seem minor to me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. On page 50, under objectives, let's see, there's a suggestion that we remove the word increase, second bullet under objectives, first word, and replace it with protect and improve the supply of quality housing to meet the affordable housing needs of the town's households and then less than 60% of the median household income and thus face a high cost of living. That, any thoughts on that, Chris?
I thought Cindy recommended language there at the last meeting, and we were going to rewrite that. And I don't think it said protect and improve. I thought it was more, it just came up with a different word than increase. Cindy, is this your recommendation?
I think it's Lori's.
Yeah.
Lori, isn't it yours? I'm going to pass the buck on that one.
Yeah, no, that was my recommendation. That was in the, I think, objectives, and Cindy's was somewhere else at the end. Cindy's was a whole section in the recommendation, and that particular rewording was in the objectives, and it's just a little bit softer than increase. I think improve can be taken as increase, but maybe not so directly. Just a slightly less aggressive wording is all I was suggesting. And we already discussed it. So, and you already said you were going to rewrite the paragraph. So we'll just see how you write it.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't have that with me now, but I did think that we struck a good compromise set of language. So ideally we'd make that, we tie these two things together. The objective and the recommendation would have essentially the same language. But
Okay,
I understand.
and the next one was a suggestion that an additional objective on page 50 be added that reads, assess and consider affordable housing needs and senior housing needs when reviewing development and redevelopment opportunities. I don't.
So that was mine again. And that was my suggestion. You know, rather than just say we're going to increase, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I think, you know, we should always be assessing our situation and our needs when we're considering this. So that's why that's my suggested wording, and please use it where you see fit.
Chairman Brown,
Yes, go ahead.
Lori, let me see if I understand. Doing that would allow, that could be done, I should say, in a negotiation with the developer or builder. Is that what you're saying? So
That
we
is
could,
what I'm saying.
so we could say to them, you know, we need, whether it's money or land that they own some other place or something. I mean, that's a big ask, but we could do something with it. And so that would be, to me, that's the only place we would do it.
Yeah, that's kind of what a lot of people do. A lot of people say, a lot of people have certain units designated in a larger unit and say you have to have X amount of affordable housing, and there's lots of ways to do it. I just think saying we must increase without assessing the situation in the first place is too far. Not assessing is not far enough. And so I think to ongoingly assess the situation is the right way to go.
I put this up, Jan, to show you that here's an example of a developer working in Baltimore County addressing the issue of housing for seniors. And this is a duplex, and it's designed as one story essentially, particularly the smaller of the units for senior. So it appeals to seniors. And all the developers now in other communities I'm working in, generally within the sort of the general development community, are looking at these types of models so they can deliver house plans where everything's on one level that appeal to seniors and others. They broaden the market. They've extended the likelihood that people can live within their communities long-term. So, you know, if you assess, like Lori says, the need for affordable housing, then you actually think about how the houses would look when developer submits the plan. And you think, well, maybe you should develop some houses that allow for ground floor residential units rather than everything stacked vertically. So, yeah.
It looks great.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love something like that in our town.
So I like the idea, and if the commission likes it too, I could write it as the objective that Lori says, because it keeps an eye on on things.
Well, what is it that you wanted to write again, Chris? How would you write that?
Well, I pretty much the way that it's written.
Oh, okay.
Basically, you're assessing opportunities as you review development and redevelopment proposals. I mean, conceivably, you could even see a situation if you had a developer's rights and responsibilities agreement that you could allow a certain development, certain flexibility if they delivered some of the units in a way that are marketed to local seniors or senior population, or some
Wonderful.
of them are designed to be occupied, even if we don't know that they will. At least we're building in the resiliency in the community to have units that appeal to seniors. That's how I would sort of vision operationalizing an objective like this. One way.
Well, I like it because I wrote it, so I won't vote.
You like what?
I said I
Feel
like
like
it because I wrote it, so I won't vote.
Well, I
Okay,
might
it seems generally accepted, so we can move on to the next item. On page 52, we talk about houseboats, and I think we made it clear the last discussion that houseboats we weren't going to address them in the plan here. Yeah. So first paragraph on page 53, it says that this plan does not designate an official growth area, and we're still deciding that, correct, Chris?
Yes, correct.
All right, so that remains to be addressed. And the last one I have for chapter 6 is on page 53. As the comprehensive plan does not designate an official growth area beyond the town's boundaries, identify other lands to develop for housing options, both market rate and subsidized. Commissioner Brault, you want to further elaborate on that?
I'm sorry, I was looking at my plan. Say that again, I'm sorry.
That was your suggestion for page 53. If the comprehensive plan does not designate an official growth area beyond the town's boundaries, identify other lands to develop for housing options, both market rate and subsidized. Now, since we haven't decided whether we're gonna suggest a growth area, that's kind of unresolved till we figure that out, I think.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to determine, what was the official growth area. And, would this also include the area that we had talked about earlier in Randolph Cliffs, possibly that acquisition?
No, this is something different.
Yeah, I think that's a different, that's more of a park area that people are talking about, an undeveloped area, not a
Okay.
growth area.
Kathleen, that was in one of our discussions, that considering putting some kind of either subsidized or senior housing there, but I think that got nixed, if I
Okay.
remember correctly.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see, it's almost 9 o'clock. Give the option for somebody to make a motion to adjourn. If we do that, then we'll ask for public comment before we adjourn. Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn, or do we want to forge ahead?
I would move to adjourn.
Okay, we have one motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'm always outnumbered on this one. You are such dogs when it comes to working hard here. Okay,
All
I'll
right,
buck up.
all right. So we'll move forward. In chapter 7, an observation, the Bayside Park is mentioned in a number of places. There is no Bayside Park, it's Bayfront Park. Let's see, on page 55, second paragraph after the last sentence, suggested to add, however, a significant expansion. That's where that word appears, which we aren't going to use. However, a significant expansion of the Rod and Reel Resort is currently underway, and the effect that it will have on capacity restraints along Maryland Route 261 are not yet known. Do not include exhibit parentheses. Traffic counts that have taken place in 2020 will not be accurate due to COVID-19 pandemic, and these traffic counts will be irrelevant once high intensity development of the Rod and Reel Resort is complete. So I think Commissioner Blackwelder, was that your sentence?
That was, yes, that was mine. And it was, I wanted to add that, that sentence, and of course we can remove the word casino, but I did want to capture that, you know, the preceding sentence was about how we built the bridge to relieve the traffic, but we also added more traffic. So I just want to capture that in the plan so that we don't think that we're all good to go on that road, because I really don't think we are.
Okay, any
And
other
that's
discussion?
I think I agree. In fact, it's what drives my interpretation of some of these changes we're making is the fact that I know you guys can't see me, can you?
Yes.
Let me go back here.
We can see you.
Okay, all right. Okay, let me think about what I'm saying here. The choke point at Mears and Bayside is a big concern of ours. And I think that is what's driving a lot of our concerns about any kind of development in that area. People who live south of 260, you know, have experience in the past, before we had COVID, of course, and especially during the development of the current hotel construction, we experience a lot of issues with traffic, et cetera. I'm concerned that especially when they add the extra 20,000 square feet that's still due to come onto that hotel. And I know we've heard from the owners saying that we're going to have maybe 170 weddings a year. We're going to have a lot more use, of course, of that hotel than we've ever experienced before, that we're going to have a little bit of a choke point. Well, we do have a choke point. We've always had a choke point. And even with the enlargement of that bridge, I noticed that we have an issue with emergency vehicles trying to get through there. When people are trying to turn left, they don't know if should they turn left, while there's somebody honking behind them. What do they do on that bridge to try and you know, provide access? So I've been really concerned. So I think Lori's point on this is we have to be very cognizant as a town that is a choke point that we don't know yet how severe it's going to be, especially during big events when there are huge weddings, et cetera. Or we know 4th of July is a whole different issue. But so I think that point should be put in there, and we've got to remind everybody that, yes, we're well aware we are in a very odd time here where we can't really see the true use of this hotel. So I agree. I'd like to put it in there, actually.
Okay. Anyone else comments?
I have to comment.
Yes, go ahead.
If not for any reason, just to reflect the integrity of the Planning Commission's legacy, because it was people like you who reviewed the traffic study that was prepared and found that it was consistent with state's requirements for traffic studies, and it was adequate and sufficient. So there, we do have, as best as we can figure with the science of traffic engineering, a good understanding of what the potential impact would be. And even if it's slightly different, it's not enough to make the traffic on 261 there in town substantially different. The levels of service that are projected are A and B, which is the highest that you can have. And as far as the traffic data, that is real data. And that when I use the year 2020 in that graphic or the illustration, that's the year that data was published. It's actually 2019 data. It was recorded in 2019. And if we want to go back even further to 2018, because there was no impact of COVID, certainly in 2018, you see essentially the same numbers, meaning that, as everybody has seen, this is almost universal throughout Maryland, there has been a gradual flattening of traffic, and that has happened here in town. So I don't like the idea of changing facts. I I like the idea of structuring ideas and taking different courses of action and developing policy. But the facts are traffic has not increased that much over 20 years' time, despite growth in the county. And that's an important thing to keep in mind because when we introduce new development, and we're not going to very much, there's plenty of margin within the traffic system to accommodate growth. And that's, I want you, that you may not agree with that, but I wanted to share that with you for the record. And we have had development happening in the town, but since 2004, traffic has basically flatlined up until 2019, literally just flat. It's just the way it is. And this is not the town talking, this is the State Highway Administration that certifies these numbers, and this is their data. They approved the traffic study that the town required. Is done according to standards. So, you know, it's okay to say that we expect that that traffic study is wrong, but it's not okay to dismiss it and act like we don't know or we don't have information or that we haven't done information. And I'd just be inclined to add a footnote. If we go in the direction that Lori's suggesting here, I think it's important to have a footnote.
Chris, you just broke up. Could you say that again?
Oh, I think it's important to footnote the existing traffic study to put things in context. We have real data, and sometimes it's better than just conjecture. Not to suggest the policy can't be different. And I mean, if you want to say we want to go in a future where there's no more intense development because we're concerned about traffic impacts, fine, that's one thing. But don't change the data that we have. That's what this whole plan is built on, real data, traffic studies and traffic impact analyses done by the state.
Oh.
And unless you're what the state's doing out there, they are monitoring traffic, and they've actually shown in many years it's decreased.
You keep cutting out, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Study. That property has been under development for the last 3 years and has had reduced traffic. We added 14 hotel rooms and we doubled the size of the casino. That traffic study does not need to be in our plan. And
it doesn't have to be.
that,
I'm just saying that there was a traffic study done. And by the way, the study assumed a 3% annual increase in traffic, even though we know the traffic has been declining over time. So it built in a level of conservative thinking. I'm not arguing for the traffic study. I just want you to know that there's real data here that you should be aware of as planning commission members. You can dismiss it, but I'm bringing it to your attention so that you know and you can make reasonable decisions.
okay. And the plan is going to be used as a reason why we can't deny more intent. I just don't think it belongs in the plan. I would prefer a fresh traffic study after that development was done.
I'm not saying that the traffic study should be in the plan. What I'm saying is that the data from the State Highway Administration that shows only gradual increases over time is realistic, and it's good to have data in the plan.
You
that
cut
shows
out,
that.
Chris.
We don't hear you, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe that's better. I don't know.
it's probably better. I'm sorry, and you're freezing too. I guess the connection.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe you've heard enough of me to decide what to do, but I can leave it at that.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to remove it and to add that language.
Okay, do we have a second?
I would like to second that.
Okay, we have a motion to remove it, and we have a second. Let's go down the list. Commissioner Blackwelder.
Well,
Yes, remove it.
we have to have some
Aye.
we have to have some discussion here.
Discussion, more discussion. Okay.
Sorry. Let me just go back here again.
Okay, what language is it that we're going to add? Lori, I guess it's yours.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so we're just gonna add, when it says, in Chris's sentence, it says,
Paragraph 56, I mean, the page 56.
Page
page
55.
56, there is it page 55? It's
Okay,
page
thank you.
6. It's page 56 on. Anyways, there's a sentence that says that there was a bridge built. Second paragraph after last sentence. In the center of town, Bayside Road features 2 lanes plus a continuous left-hand turning lane. The recently